So I think I told you in one of my first sermons how when it comes to playing games, my wife is the one that does instructions. Apparently, the way I explained how to do the DRC is a good example why. Circle 7 names on that. We want that back before you leave today because we'd like to move forward. So if you don't have a paper and still would like one, please raise your hand and deacons will get that to you. But before you leave today, hand that to us at the door because we would like to move forward in creating a DRC so that we can get you guys involved here at church. So, what a worship service already. I got bad news. We're not going to finish at noon today. I was going to do my best, but that ship sailed. But what a beautiful service. I've missed you guys. I did not intend to be gone as long as I was. But in all fairness, I knew I was going to be gone for a while because I realized that last July, not last month, but a year ago, because we had just finished our vacation and we sat down for our last breakfast before we headed to ministerial meetings. And that's when we told Emmett what his birthday present was going to be. Because he was heading into 4th grade, and 4th graders get a free national parks pass. So we said, hey, you can choose any national park in the continental U.S. We definitely put some limits on it. And we'll go there. Now, Emmett is really into birds. He likes birding, and so he started researching in ways that could earn a dissertation what kind of park he should go to. And he finally settled on Acadia because he wanted to see puffins. Good news, we saw the puffins. But it took a while to get there and then a while to get back, and then we had to go from there to ministerial. And so the plan was last Friday I was supposed to drive from my in-laws' house because my wife was having a family reunion there. I was going to drive back to preach, and Thursday night, my boys said, will you play soccer? Now, they had been asking all day, but I had been saying, no, I've got to be working on my sermon. And so finally I said, you know what? I need to play with them. That was my first mistake. We went out in the yard and we were playing soccer, and it wasn't bad enough that as all of us have been getting older, I'm no longer winning. That wasn't bad enough. But at one point, I was running for the ball, and it felt like something hit the back of my leg. And then excruciating pain, like a Charlie horse of unusual size. And so I fell to the ground and I said, what hit my leg? And everybody looked at me like I was crazy, and they're like, nothing hit your leg. Hobbled inside. My wife said, can I massage that for you? That did not make it feel better at all. So we decided we were going to go to a clinic and have it looked at, but we got there and they were like, yeah, we're not seeing you this late in the day. Goodbye. And so we had to go to the ER, and the doctor came in, and immediately things went from bad to worse because I thought I had pulled a muscle, and she looked at me and was like, no, this is your Achilles tendon, which did not feel good to hear. Luckily, another doctor came in and said, no, it's not your Achilles. It's gastrocnemius muscle, which is a calf muscle. You've torn that. You probably won't need surgery, but you're also not going to put any weight on it or drive a car for a while. So I missed you last Sabbath, but here we are. Sometimes our bodies don't do what they're supposed to. Sometimes things break. Sometimes our bodies let us down. And it's not just our human bodies, but the church as well. The body of Christ, sometimes things break. Sometimes the church hurts us. And for those of us who've grown up in the church, we've experienced that. You can't live your life in the Seventh-day Adventist church without experiencing hurt. Hurt by the people who were supposed to be on the same team. We're supposed to be working together. Yet here we are. To understand the body, let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Paul talks about the body of Christ in Romans, Corinthians, and Ephesians. But in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 14 to 21, he writes, "Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but many. If the foot would say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? And as it is, there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I have no need for you,' nor the head to the feet, 'I have no need of you.'" We need diversity in the body. We have different gifts. We have different abilities. We have different viewpoints. And all of these things are needed for us to work together. This is what makes the body great. If all of us thought and did the same thing all the time, well, the body would be just as good with one of us. But it needs all of us working together. But the problem is when we have different gifts and talents, when we have different ways of thinking, when we have different abilities, it often causes friction. There are times where we don't agree. There are times when we hurt each other. And it doesn't make it easier that the body is made up of broken, hurting, sinful people. We make mistakes. We hurt each other unintentionally and intentionally. What's the solution, though? My boys, since they were young, when they hurt themselves, my wife has taken an interesting approach, because she looks at them and says, "Would you like me to amputate that?" Which usually helps them to feel better, because she just cuts the pain right off. And we laugh, but sometimes this is what we do in church, where we say, okay, if you're going to cause a problem, we're going to make a cut. But that, thank the goodness, was never Jesus' approach. He could have very easily, when we messed up, said, okay, we're going to make a cut. But instead, he didn't disconnect himself from us. He became one of us. Another approach that has been suggested is when the church doesn't behave the way it should, we should punish it by stopping giving tithe. And Malachi chapter 3. Verse 8 it's a verse that we're all familiar with because it's often shared during calls for offering. Will anyone rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how are we robbing you? In your tithes and offerings. But seldom, if ever, do we look at the context of the book of Malachi. Because in chapter 1, it's talking about the corruption of the priesthood. And even when the priests are behaving badly, even when they are misusing God's money, that is the point when God says, will you rob me by not paying? It is not our job to police the church. Us giving tithe is about our relationship with God, and how people use the tithe is about their relationship with God. Let him deal with how it is being used. But we've got to be faithful to him. But to really understand the body, I like to look at Ephesians 4. In fact, this whole series about relationships could have been preached out of the book of Ephesians. And as we think about our relationship with the church, start with verse 11. The gifts that he gave were some would be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. What is the purpose of the gifts? To build up the body. Often when we talk about church growth, we just think about, okay, how do we get more people in our church? But healthy body growth isn't just getting bigger. It's also getting stronger. Because if you only get bigger without getting stronger, well then you kind of look like I did as a teenager. And that's not ideal. Healthy growth has to be stronger as it gets bigger. Healthy growth has got to be about our relationship with each other also. And this continues in verses 15 and 16. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way unto him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body joined in it together by every ligament which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth and building itself up in love. Years ago, I was a student missionary in China. And one afternoon, my sister and I decided we had had enough Chinese food. I like Chinese food. It is my favorite kind of food, but sometimes you want something different, and they had just opened a Pizza Hut in the city we lived in. Now, this was the city of Hangzhou. I'm not going to ask how many of you heard of it. It's a small city in China. It roughly has the population of Los Angeles. And so my sister and I, we were headed to Pizza Hut. Now, we knew we needed to get there early because there were lots of people who apparently were in the mood for pizza. And so there was a long line when it opened every day. And so we were going to get there early, and my sister was going to ride ahead. We were going to ride our bicycles across the city of Hangzhou. And so she rode ahead, and I had to make some stops along the way. And as I was riding my bicycle, I was going through an intersection there, and I looked over my left shoulder, and I realized everything was about to change. Because there, approaching quickly, was a truck. And then everything went black. When I came to again, There was a crowd who gathered around me all talking at the same time. Everything went black again. When I came to again, one of my students who stumbled across me helped carry me into the hospital, which was right next door. And the doctors started doing tests to figure out what had gone wrong because I had just been hit by a truck and I wasn't even wearing a helmet. Now, you have to understand, as if this wasn't evidence enough, I'm fairly fragile. When I was 8, I was playing with my brothers and I expressed my feelings to my oldest brother, and then he was going to pursue me to express his feelings more physically. And before he even caught me, my right foot and left foot had a disagreement on direction, and I fell and broke my arm in 3 places without my brother touching me. This was at Nasoka Pines Ranch, the summer camp in South Carolina. That's only important because the next time I broke my arm was also there. I was playing basketball all by myself. And I fell and I went to catch myself and I broke my left wrist. I was good for the next 9 months until I was riding a scooter in Taiwan and I braked, and apparently the front brakes were more effective than the back brakes. And so in an accident involving only me, I broke the exact same bone on my right wrist. Which, interestingly enough, there's only a clinic on the island where we were camping at that time. And so I went in and they said, "What do you think is wrong?" And I said, "Oh, I broke this bone. It's a scaphoid fracture." And they said, "Oh, you seem to know a lot about this." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "What should we do?" I said, "Well, we've got to cast it." And they said, "Oh, we have casting supplies if you would like to cast it." I said, "No, thank you." And so we finished the camping trip, and then I got it cast on. I break easily. And so I've just been hit by a truck, and the doctors are trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't know what it is about doctors, but they like to poke you and ask, "Does this hurt?" You should also know, well, I'll share it in a story. When I was young, 2nd grade, we had a hill in our backyard, and my brothers one day said, "This will be fun." I shouldn't have listened to them, but they convinced me that it would be fun, and they put me in a tire, and they said, "You can roll down the hill." I didn't think about the fact that when you're in the tire, there are no brakes. And so I didn't stop until I connected with a tree. And that night, my father came into my room, and I was holding my neck and whimpering. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I think I broke my neck because I'm a hypochondriac." My father, who I got that from, took me to the emergency room. And there I was diagnosed with a stiff neck and a low pain threshold.